Back with you tonight, you're in Focus. Thanks for staying on. Kidnappings and hijackings shot up dramatically by 59.1% year on year, driven largely by 42 hijacking, ransom kidnappings and human trafficking. Crime expert Dr. Chris de Kock has observed that kidnappings are an additional charge to aggravated robbery like hijacking and house robbery. The shocking numbers were revealed during the latest crime statistics released by Police Minister Bheki Cele. Other experts have reportedly said that infighting among foreign nationals in the country may also be playing a role in the exponential rise in kidnappings. Joining us now to discuss the dramatic rise in the new trend is crime expert Dr. Chris de Kock. Dr. de Kock, good evening and thank you very much for your time. Is there a direct relationship between the figures that we are looking at and maybe the general rise in crime following, of course, the lifting of the restrictions that we saw during the lockdowns?
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, I think we saw a dramatic increase in kidnapping in the first quarter of the last financial year. That is the previous financial year, 21-22. Then we had in the 128% increase. This time, for this first quarter of the 22-23 financial year, we had a 59% increase in kidnapping. But I think this can mainly be explained by the fact that kidnap is an additional charge to a crime like carjacking. Especially during carjacking, many cases the driver or the owner of the vehicle are also kidnapped and taken with the car up to a certain point where the driver is then dropped. This is to ensure that the driver can't alert the police or the tracking company or somebody else. The same applied to truckjacking. You know, we had a dramatic increase for the last 3 years in carjacking, and then also in truckjacking, even more in truckjacking. If we take truckjacking, that increased from something like in 2019, 820, 283, then it went up to 411, and this time in this first quarter there was 508 truckjackings. Now, also during that, the driver are taken with. And then we have house robbery. Even if you are kept against your will, facing a gun, facing another weapon, for 2 or 3 minutes, that is kidnapping. In South Africa, kidnapping doesn't necessarily involve a ransom. Now, when people hear the word kidnapping, they immediately think of ransom, that you take somebody to ask for some money, some ransom.
Right.
But that is actually a very small part of our kidnappings.
Sorry, Dr. Chris. So are you saying, are we seeing an increase in the numbers because more and more people are reporting such incidents of kidnapping, which you've just described now, or is there still a degree of underreporting of those events?
Well, you see, I mean, if you are kidnapped for ransom, the people who will ask for this ransom will say, well, if you go to the police, we will kill this person. So it may be that some of these are not reported. But at the present moment, if we look at the stats and the breakup of the stats, it is actually a very small part. In this last quarter, there were of the 3,550 kidnappings, only 86 was for ransom. And maybe we can add to that the extortion cases of 54. Now, that gives you about a little bit more than 4% of the 3,550 cases. But it is also increasing. Even on this very, very small numbers, if you look over the past 2 to 3 years, it seems we have a little bit more ransom cases. What is the traditional kidnapping where you kidnap somebody, you just don't keep them against their will, as in the case of carjackings or house robberies. But here you take specifically somebody like the 3 brothers which was taken last year in Polokwane. The Moti brothers.
The Moti brothers, yes.
And there were also other interesting cases last year.
Yeah.
Now, it may be, as you say, that these cases are underreported, but I don't think it is so much underreported. I think our kidnappings is mostly as a result of robbery aggravated.
Extortion, you're saying it's also becoming a little bit of an issue, and it is on the rise. Do you know what are the circumstances around those particular cases, and what leads to that kind of kidnapping being committed?
Well, it's very much the same as a ransom. You take somebody because that person owe you some money, some big money. Now you kidnap a family member of that person, and you say, well, if you don't pay me, I'm going to kill this person. So it's basically very much the same type of thing. I also want to refer to one other one, because, in South Africa, we also, when we hear kidnapping, we immediately think of human trafficking, that people are grabbed, especially young girls are taken, and then they are trafficked to some country overseas where they are going to be used, for example, as sex slaves, as sex workers and this type of thing. But against their will, they are going to be kept like modern days slaves. Now, if we look at the figures there, it is extremely low. It is actually very low, and it stays very low. In this last quarter that was released now Friday, it's only 0.5. Now, in that case, clearly, if my child is being kidnapped, a young daughter, I will immediately report it. I will immediately report it if she just disappears, and I think that she was kidnapped, and now she's part of human trafficking.
Yeah.
I don't think we have underreporting there.
What is the trend in terms of the areas or the hotspots where you see a lot of these kidnappings, be it maybe provincially? Is it Gauteng? Is it KwaZulu-Natal? Is it the Western Cape? Is there a difference in where most of these crimes are committed?
Well, Gauteng stands out very, very clearly. And it's also Gauteng which stands out when it is carjacking, house robbery, and truckjacking. So Gauteng, because it has high levels of those other crimes, it also has the highest level of kidnapping, and then followed by KZN, KwaZulu-Natal, and then followed by the Western Cape. And usually it is these three provinces. Now, if you look at stations, the top 30 stations, it is also interesting that your top hijacking stations, your carjacking stations, are also the top kidnapping stations, with the exception of something like Verulam and Lenasia. Because Lenasia, when we talk, Lenasia, Lodium, places like that, is usually also where you have the traditional, the classical kidnapping, where people are taken, rich businessmen usually are taken, and then they are kidnapped, and then they ask for a price to be paid.
Yeah. How successful are we in capturing and prosecuting those who are organized syndicates, particularly around the crime that you just mentioned now, where business people are being taken in for ransom and extortion and so on and so forth? How successful are we in reuniting, I suppose, if it's children that are taken with their families, and certainly prosecuting those who are involved, be it organized criminal syndicates or maybe some opportunistic criminals as well?
Well, I can remember last year, there were just few high-profile cases, and many of them were eventually solved. Many of them the children were united, and the businessmen were united with their families after a while, but it was successfully done. I don't have a percentage because it's difficult, because you won't have, even if you look at all the kidnapping cases, you won't have this breakdown that I've just given you when it comes to conviction or people arrested and then convicted.
Yeah. Dr. Chris, I wonder what your view is. Some of the experts have weighed in on the issue. They seem to believe that infighting within foreign national communities could also be a contributing factor towards the increase. What's your analysis?
Yeah, this is possible, especially among certain communities. The communities coming from countries which are traditional countries where you find high levels of kidnapping. Let me just mention one or two examples. Pakistan, Bangladesh. People from there, in those countries, kidnapping is quite a problem. And then even South American countries, but we don't have many foreigners from that area. But we have Pakistanis, we have Bangladeshis, and it may be infighting in those communities between those people, which then give you kidnappings.
Dr. Chris de Kock, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on tonight, helping us in this conversation. Expert and former head of Crime Information Analysis Center, Dr. Chris de Kock there.